Christina George and Renee Chavez. Welcome to Aliens, UFOs, and Beyond with your hosts, Christina George and Renee Chavez, only on DTMGoodRadio.com.
All right, everyone. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Aliens, UFOs, and Beyond. I'm Christina George, your host, along with my co-host, Renee Chavez. Are you there, Renee?
Yes, I am. Live, too.
All right. And we
Sunny
are
California.
ready for sunny California. I know, it's very sunny California. It's been kind of crazy weather all over the place, but at least we still got some nice sun, other than the thunder and lightning we got the other night. That wasn't bad.
True. Yeah.
But tonight we've got a great show for you. And I know so many of you have, when we have been asking, is there, a guest that you'd like to see on the show, a topic that you would like to, hear about, we've asked you to, send those in to us, and I'll tell you, I've been flooded with all kinds of them. And one of the top requests was for our guest tonight, and that's Brett Oldham. And he is actually the author of his own book, and it's called Children of the Graves. Now, I will tell you, unfortunately, I have not had the pleasure of reading the book. I am planning on doing it, but actually a couple of my researchers on my team have read it, many people who I know online, and everybody's just raving about the book. So tonight is going to be an amazing night. If you have questions for our guest tonight, we are going to, or actually, you know what, before I give the call-in number, because we may have a different one, we're having some issues, so we're also simultaneously on Blog Talk. So let me find out from my producer. So, Tiffany, if you could send me a private message in Facebook and let me know what the call-in number is going to be for tonight, or if it's the one that I have on social media, I'd appreciate that. But for everybody else we've got in chat, I welcome you to chat. If you have any problems, then I will put up another link for the Blog Talk link. But so far, so good. We hope everything works out, and let me know if you have any problems. With that being said, Brett, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on, and it's our pleasure. Boy, what a book you have, and what a story you have.
Yeah, it took over 20 years to get the courage to actually write this book. I knew about my experiences after I began having anxiety attacks, and I was in my 20s at that time. So it's just something that, with the stigma that's placed on people that go through this kind of thing, I just kept it to myself all those years. It's not something I recommend anybody doing if you're having these experiences. Times have changed. Certainly talk about it. Let somebody know about it. There's a lot of us that are starting to come out with our stories, and if they're not going to the full book that I did, at least they're coming out and talking about it online in groups and stuff like that. And I find that really encouraging, because I just got to the point where I'm not getting any younger, and I knew that if I could help others that have experienced the similar things that I have, which really causes a lot of trauma, and if anything that I could relate to my experiences, I had so many memories surfaced, and in such great detail over the years, and it's continuous to this day. But I just knew my wife started urging me to do it, and it was a long process. I mean, it was a 2-year process, and I would go a couple chapters or so, and I would start getting so depressed I couldn't get. I was having to relive it all. Was the worst part of it, to get the stories out, and I would have to stop, and I'd wait, and then I kind of build back up again. The strength to do it and start up again, and but. Now that it's done, I've had a really positive response. I really appreciate that from everybody out there that's wrote on Amazon and wrote positive things and sent me messages and stuff. And a lot of people have other experiencers and have contacted me and told me a lot of the same things have happened to them, but they never had to tell anybody either, and thank me. And it's really been encouraging, and I hope that it has helped a lot of people out there, and I hope that I help bring about more public awareness to the subject.
Absolutely, and now I don't feel so bad because I've been actually journaling about my life and all the crazy stuff that's happened, being a psychic, having the paranormal, a very, very prevalent, reality in my life. Mm-hmm. And I always journaled, and everybody I ever would talk to once I became an adult would always say, oh, my gosh, you have such an amazing story. You should definitely write a book. And I thought, who would want to read a book on, this craziness? And, when I got into the paranormal field, I found out that there's all kinds. But trying to put that book together, even with all of the journaling I have and stuff, it is very hard. And I can absolutely agree with you that sometimes when I'm rereading through some of my journal, it is very sad. It brings everything back, and it's like reliving it all over again. And
mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I could definitely.
But I will tell you, if you finish it, it'll be therapeutic for you. I mean, if it's anything like what happened to me, once the book went public, there was people that knew me for years and years and years and had no idea that I was going through this. I mean, that's you do your best to try to live a normal, whatever that is, existence.
Yes.
And it's almost a double life. I mean, you try to be a normal person and mix in society and just be a regular guy, and yet, you're psychologically dealing with these traumatic events that's happened. Really, for me, it started way back when I was 5 years old, and it's a lot to deal with. So the book was. I had no idea what was going to be the reaction, but like you, I'm sure that people who know you, they're like, wow, this is, if this person's saying this has happened, then it happened, and that's what with me. I mean, I had so many people that knew me and I think respected me and everything that they didn't doubt this when it came out. They were just in awe that I had kept this quiet for such a long time. And there was even relatives, close family members that had no idea. Matter of fact, I didn't even, my wife Gina didn't even know for the first couple of years we were married. She also has been in the paranormal and UFO fields for a long time, and interest in research and books and all that stuff. But so she kind of recognized a lot of the signs. Namely, your husband's waking up with nightmares 2 or 3 times a month, and that kind of, with no explanation as to why. And I would just tell her, bad dream. If you hear me, just please try to wake me up and get me out of it. And that was the only thing I requested of her. And I've got physical marks on my body from some of the procedures that are unexplainable even to the doctor. I write about all that in the book, and she saw them. I've got scars on my back and puncture marks on my rib cage and scoop marks, and she would ask, but I just would tell her I didn't want to talk about it. So it gets that people can be that deep trying to hide the reality of what's happening because you kind of just don't want to deal with it, and it's just that fear of what somebody's reaction is going to be. And sort of in her case, I kind of felt like I was protecting her because you worry about that this is going to happen to other family members. Even to this day, I worry this is going to happen to my daughter.
Right.
And of course, your partner, they're coming to get you. What's going to stop them from taking them too? And so that's another kind of thing that you got to deal with is not just yourself, but your immediate family members and stuff.
Absolutely. We've got the call-in number now. So if for anybody who might have any kind of questions tonight for our guest, the call-in number tonight is going to be 607-244-8483. So that will be the number that you'll call tonight if you have any questions. Oh, I'm sorry, 6483. And I'm sorry. Yeah, it is very hard, and that is something that with many abductees and contactees that I've interviewed over the years, that is kind of that sense of helplessness, because, you know, it's kind of twofold. Number one, like you said, it is not something that up until, you know, recently people felt comfortable with talking about. It was something just like with, you know, my situation with being a psychic. You know, when society does not believe in certain things, even though it may be your reality, you do learn to live that kind of double life. But when you are dealing with something that you have no control over, absolutely it worries you to death, because you don't want your children to go through these kind of things. You're supposed to be a protector, you know, as you said, your wife, but how do you really, you know, protect your family? And you can't protect yourself. So yeah, it makes it very, very hard. Now, you said your first experience was back when you were 5 or 6. Is that right?
Five, yeah.
5.
Yeah.
And what was that about, or like?
Well, we lived in a farm. I lived in a farm in southern Illinois at that time, and in fact, I just recently spoke here from Nevada MUFON, and I was able to get on Google and find an aerial shot of the old farmhouse. It's still there.
Wow.
And it really gave people an idea just how isolated where we lived, because I talk about it, you know, it's like, yeah, it was by a gravel road, you know, no immediate neighbors, and surrounded by soy fields and cornfields, and I was just happy to find it, and I presented them in the PowerPoint, and you really could show exactly like, and this is where, you know, it happened at this house, and this basically what happened was, it was a 2-story house, and in the fall, my parents would shut off the top part of the house. The stairwell in this house was actually in the middle, and you could just shut a door and close off the top section of the house, and to save on the heating bill, that's what they did. And my brother and I slept on the floor in the living room, and it was old hardwood floors, and my sister got the couch, and we were just sleeping there one night, and I got awakened by a voice. I heard somebody talking to me, and I raised up, and I thought it was my stepdad. I looked around, I didn't see anybody. There's no street lights out there. It's very, very quiet, and it was just there was a very bright light coming through the side window, and I couldn't figure out what was causing that. And I kept hearing this voice telling me to come to it, and it had something to show me, and things that you would tell a young child. And at that point, I wasn't afraid of anything. I was just kept wondering who it was wanted me, and what did they want, and what were they going to show me, and all this kind of thing. And I was being urged to come to the window, but I didn't come to the window that the light was coming through. I actually went to the window on the adjacent wall, and we had these white, really thin white curtains hanging down. There was no blinds. There's really no reason for it. And I remember walking to the window. I took my right hand and I pulled the curtains back, and at that instant, my life changed. Standing a foot and a half in front of me was what we know now as a typical gray. I had never I never had comic books. This was in the 60s. Nobody was really talking. The media wasn't flooded with depictions of aliens like it is now. At that point in my life, I hadn't even seen other races of people, of us, let alone, having any kind of thing to relate to an alien.
Right.
We just had an old black and white TV. I wasn't like a kid that really watched a lot of TV. I was one of those just outside playing all the time. And so the shock was just indescribable. It was literally just right there, standing right in front of me. And in the yard, there was two other ones further out, closer to a tree that we had in the front yard. And before I could react, scream, anything, I blacked out. And the next thing, I was on a table on a craft, or what I believe to be a craft, and surrounded by these things, just going into hysterics. And the shock of that first impression of seeing the gray right in front of me literally stuck with me, and really till just a few years ago. I was still having nightmares about that. I mean, it made just such an indelible mark on my psyche. It just didn't leave.
Right.
It was just too much for a 5-year-old at that point. And they tried to put in my mind that they all appeared like in doctors' uniforms, and that really didn't help matters any. It didn't calm me down any. I started screaming for my mom. There was no one there to help me, and they got me calmed down and took me into another part of the craft where there was a tall gray sitting down, and it was actually a part of the craft that was built. It seemed to be built into the craft, which is something I have often seen as opposed to actually furniture. It seems to be part of the craft itself, and it was sort of an indented area with these sort of half-moon shaped bench kind of seatings with this bluish material on it for a pad to sit on. And they set me down by the tall gray, and it was at that point that he was speaking to me telepathically. I couldn't understand how that was happening. I kept trying to speak out loud, but he really tried his best to befriend me, to calm me down and tell me all these same kind of things that they tell you, which at this point is sort of condescending, but how they're their friends and not going to hurt you, and this kind of thing. That, and I kind of he was the only one being nice to me, and I remember trying, like he was my. When you're at that age and that kind of thing, and you have no idea what's happening to you, you're going to just latch on to whatever good thing you can find, and that was a natural thing for me to do, and that's what I did. And I've seen the same tall gray over the years many times. I say this a lot, but to me, and what I believe, and after all the multiple experiences that I've had, is that the tall grays are actually the real aliens. I don't believe that I really think the small grays are biological robots. I think they're created to work for the tall grays. And they seem to have a very hive mentality. They almost seemed just programmed to be doing, very matter of fact. Everything's logic based, and they just go about their job, just kind of say the same things all the time. And there's, from my experience, a big difference between the tall grays, who are clearly in charge. Actually, will have somewhat of a conversation, maybe answer questions to a certain point. As opposed to the smaller ones who really look like all clones of each other. Right. And that started it with me. That was the first experience.
Wow. I mean, and at 5 years old, I can just, again, imagine how traumatic that would be on any child. I mean, of course, you're not knowing what's going on. Your parents are nowhere around. You're seeing something that, number one, you don't understand and can't really comprehend because you don't know anything about any of this. As you said, being from a very rural area, that makes a whole lot of sense. So it would be very, very traumatic. Now, did these abductions continue to go on your whole life? And if so, how often did it seem to happen?
Yeah, they took me one more time. They didn't suppress my memories at that time. I guess they knew that at that age that nobody was going to believe me anyway. And I remember, even my mom remembers me talking about the little men, who took me. And she just it's his imaginary friends. And that was it. And so they took me one more time. That I remembered from the farmhouse. They did it a little bit different the second time, but it was very similar type circumstances. And but I walked through a mud room and onto a small porch. And one of the things that I remember the second time was I was standing on this concrete porch, and that even though I was just a child, I felt so so big, because they themselves weren't very big, and I was standing on this about 1.5 feet, 2 feet up, and I'm looking down at them. I didn't have the fear the second time. I don't know if it's something that they mentally did to me, but I just took a step off the porch. They just escorted me, and we walked out across the field, and that was the last thing I remember of that incident. But I did come back, and my mom was talking about the Wizard of Oz movie, and she was really hyping it to us kids, and so when it came on, we were all gathered around our little black and white TV set, and everybody was excited to see it, and I was really enjoying the movie until it got to the point where the flying monkeys, coming to take them, and I just went into hysterics. I started crying, and I ran out of the room, and it really hit home with me. And I mean, looking back now, I can understand it. The same little mysterious creatures taking people, and so my mom couldn't figure out what was going on and everything. And I think that they had already implanted me by that time, and they somehow knew that I had this reaction, and it was probably not safe for them to let me remember stuff anymore. And that was when the memories were suppressed. So I went through the rest of my childhood and teen years without knowing what was happening, although I had many of the common signs, reoccurring unexplained nosebleeds that doctors could not figure out what was going on. Started developing a huge interest in all things paranormal and all things UFO related. I was the weird kid that goes to the library and bringing home those kind of books, and everybody else was reading Boy Scout stuff and all that. And
pretty similar like mine. It's the way I was during that age myself, because I was about 5 years old and so forth, and then at the age of 10 having another experience after that, and it was like you had to know, you had to research every possible thing of the. Yeah,
it's like something in your subconscious mind, like it's there, and somehow like your conscious mind, you're not fully aware of it, but there's something inside you that's driving that desire to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody had that kind of had experience. Always seem to have trouble with the flying monkey scene in the Wizard of Oz.
That's interesting, because when I came out with my story, you're right. There's been several people who have told me that same thing, other abductees, and they're like, yes, there's something about the Wizard of Oz movie, and specifically the flying monkeys. And I had no idea. That's what happened to me. But since I came out in the book and people would read about it, and they were like, yeah, that's the same thing happened to me.
Isn't that interesting, though? I mean, and it doesn't matter what seems to happen. It's like once you have something strange like this happen to you, you always tend to feel that you're the only person that this could possibly have happened to. And then, because nobody talks about it, it makes it very believable to convince yourself that, you're just although you're not crazy, you just kind of are able to discount it and say, well, it doesn't happen to anybody else. I'll just keep this quiet because I don't want anybody to think I'm crazy. But then when you actually talk to people, everybody kind of feels that way. So it is.
Yeah, I call it suffering in silence, because you're afraid to talk to anybody about it, but you're still trying to live with it and deal with it. And my childhood also, and we won't get real deep into it tonight, but I started having this abnormal increase in paranormal events, and that was another thing that I was trying to also, like, why is this happening to me, and it led into the research because I wanted to make it stop, because at that point I was just scared out of my mind. And so, I just put it all together, and I did have only one incident during that time between my 13th to 14th year. I'd always been blessed and still am with remarkable health. I do attribute that to them. That's one of the positive things that I try to have pulled out of this. And I think they did it for their own benefit, but I've also benefited from it as well. And it was the same thing when I was a kid, other than sinus problems, which sometimes would lead to sore throats, just like remarkable health. And all of a sudden, I got really, really sick. I started losing weight. I couldn't eat. I had no energy. They couldn't the doctors couldn't figure out what was happening to me. It got to the point where I got so weak I couldn't walk upstairs in the house. They were going to put me in the hospital. I would get up, I would black out, and it was really bad. And in fact, the only reason I really didn't go into the hospital because we didn't have insurance. So, it was just one of those things until you wait till the last minute of necessity. And I had a dream, and I seen these aliens, the gray aliens, in the dream. And I remembered the dream, although it really wasn't a dream, but at the time I thought it was.
Right.
And they told me that that I was going to be okay. And the next morning I woke up remembering this dream, and I was like, wow, that was a really bizarre dream. Because I still, I had no idea that I was having these abduction experiences. And I felt better almost immediately, and I asked my mother if she would make me something to eat, which surprised her. I started eating. It was in no time at all I gained my strength back, and it was soon after that I was standing at the kitchen sink getting a drink of water, and I had my shirt off, and my mom was walking across the kitchen, and she looked at me and she says, "What happened to your back?" And I had no idea what she was talking about, and so I asked her, and she says, "You have this big red mark across your back." And so I go over and into the utility room and look in the mirror, and yeah, sure enough, like way down lower back. I was like, I don't know. I didn't know it was there. And so she called the doctor, and our doctor was actually practicing out of his house. This was like, we were in Ohio at this time, and it was still like pretty rural, not as rural as southern Illinois, but it was still just a small little town, and it's kind of sort of a country doctor out of his house, and she's like, "Oh, I should bring him in. I don't know what this is." And his explanation at that time was, "Oh, boy's that age. He's probably going through some kind of growth spurt, and it's a stretch mark."
Wow.
Well, I was like almost 6'2" already at that point, so I wasn't really going through the growth spurt was already happened,
Right. And
but we didn't know any better, and it's like, oh, okay, and I was getting better, so I was like, hey, I'm done with doctors, and we didn't think anything about it, but I started paying a little more close attention during my teen years, and I ended up with a couple other scars across my spine, up higher, and since then I've asked 4 to 5 different doctors. It's because it ended up as a scar, a rather large scar, and I actually had one doctor ask me when I had surgery. It's that type of thing where physicians don't even know, can't explain it. Recently, last year, I had a new female doctor when we were in Tennessee, and I took Gina in with me to get a physical. I was like, look, go in the room with me this time, and I want you as a witness, to hear this, because here's another one. It almost kind of becomes like kind of fun, and she says, are you having any problems? Like, no, I'm feeling good. But I said, oh, actually there is something. And I pulled my shirt off, and I was like, I got these marks across my spine, especially the big one at the bottom. What do you think that is? And then she asked me questions, how long have you had it, and things like that. And, I just said, no, it's early teens. And I said, I had one doctor tell me it's a stretch mark. She goes, oh, it's absolutely not a stretch mark. And they were going to take blood, as they always do on physicals. And so she says, well, there's this one kind of disease you can get that'll make your skin do some kind of weird thing, and can I do a special blood test? And I was like, sure. What's another vial at this point, right? So, and they did, and they ran a special test. I showed her the other ones too. She had this perplexed look on her face. She had no idea. They came back. It was negative. Whatever she thought it wasn't that. And she did a consultation with the other doctor in the clinic. Neither one of them had any answers for me, and that was just it. They had nothing else to say on the matter, which is usually the case. in this kind of stuff, so.
Right. And it's kind of bad that it is that way. I mean, because, you're looking for answers just as much as they are. I mean, when these things happen, you have no idea what's going on, what's happening, what the answers are. I mean, most people that, do end up going through something like this kind of become their own little investigators, because for a while they'll put it away, just kind of check out, and say, I'm not going to think about it. But, eventually, like I said, if it doesn't stop, it doesn't go away, it's like nobody else can give you answers. You're trying to find them out yourself. But, I mean, some of these answers, are very hard to find out, a clear explanation for.
Yeah, and I don't remember, and it's probably my own subconscious mind protecting me on how I got the particular unusual scars that I have. And I put photos of it in the book, I mean, I knew if I did a book, I wasn't going to hold anything back.
Right.
And there's stuff in there. There's sexual stuff in there that, but it's stuff that happened. And yeah, part of me, is sort of embarrassing, but it's stuff that you don't have any control over.
Right.
And that's something that people have to understand about this. And I tell people, a lot of women have contacted me and had sexual experiences and fetuses taken and things like that, and afraid to tell anybody because they're just humiliated and embarrassed by it. And that's one of the things I reiterate over and over again is, look, you have nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about, because people have to understand the mental, I'm talking with the Greys, but the mental capabilities that these creatures have, we can't even wrap our heads around it. They have that kind of control. And so it's not you. It's not people are volunteering to do this stuff.
Absolutely not. And it's interesting that you're talking about, the children, things like that, because I just had John Stumple from J3 Films on the show last week, and then my Paranormal Connection show on Monday. And he is doing a documentary on Stan and Lisa Romanek. And we were, talking about, their case and all the things that had happened. And, another thing, a lot of times people would think that, these children that were, of course they're being abducted, they're having, fluids taken from them, things like that, and then come to find out, later on in time that they usually have some children. Now, was that your experience as well?
Yeah, and actually that's where the title of the book, and anybody that's seen the front cover of the book, there is a picture of a small hybrid female child on there. And that was one of the most emotional things that a lot of the experiments aren't just things that they do is not just physical. They do a lot of mental things. And to me, the physical things, I'm sure some of it was pretty bad because even even my subconscious was probably protecting me on some of these scars. Like I can't remember what happened, and it's probably for that reason, just protecting. But the mental things, like physical stuff, you can heal from and move on with your life. But it's the mental experiments that they do, and that's the things that's hardest to get over. I think that it scars you the most psychologically, and that was the incident that led up to that. Really started here in Las Vegas in the late '80s, and I was living with my girlfriend. Who, even though she was practicing birth control, got pregnant. And she was about 1 week shy of her fourth month, had just been to her OBGYN, and everything was sailing smoothly. And in the middle of the night, we heard a loud bang, which turned out to be, it was an old typewriter, sort of a decorative thing, sitting on a stand in the master bedroom, and it had inadvertently got knocked off by them. I don't think they meant to wake us up, we found it the next day, but they had hit that and knocked it off. It hit the ground, hit the floor, and woke us up. We both wake up. She remembers seeing 4. I remember seeing 5. So they were clearly enough to take both of us. The one was actually back by the master bedroom and behind a wall, the way the room was designed, where she wouldn't have had view of it anyway. So, and they took us at the same time. We wake up in the same room. I'm on a table. She's on a table. I've never seen so many grays at one time ever in all my experiences. And
how many do you think were there?
At least a dozen.
Wow.
And they were surrounded on my left side. She was to a table to my right, and more closer to a wall where there was like some equipment. I was more in the middle of the room kind of thing, and they had left the whole right side of my body open, where I had a clear view of her, and they left the left side of her body open. And the first thing I saw, I mean, my head was actually turned that direction. I couldn't move any other part of my body, and they were taking the fetus. And they made no attempt to subdue her as far as letting her speak, because they can actually do that too. If they don't want to hear you, you can't speak no matter how hard you try. Right. And she was screaming, "Please don't take my baby! Stop! No!" All the things, just begging. And I recognized they had her up just like they would in a woman, delivering a baby, and they were taking it. And I was so angry, I was just beyond words, and I would have killed them if I could have. And I started cussing them out. I started telling them that, and I looked away. I was like, I'm not going to watch this. And there was one standing at the top of my head, and they're frail. They're very frail, but he put his hand with his long fingers over the top of my head, and he moved it back, forcing me to, not so much by strength, I think it was more of a mental thing, but he still had his hand there, forcing me. They clearly wanted me to watch it. And this is part of the emotional experiments that they do. This is the stuff that they subject you to, because they're creating us hybrids. The hybrids have that part of the human psychological makeup in them, and I think they don't understand how to deal with them. And so they're trying their best to understand what triggers us. That they want to elicit all these different kinds of emotions. And in that particular case, of course, they wanted to see what emotional reaction I was going to have to this scenario, and they got what they wanted, for sure. It was very hard to deal with, and I just remember being so angry. And then the next morning, I thought I remembered. The next morning, sun coming through the window, and everything's calm, and I wake up, and I actually was kind of remembered it, and I thought, wow, did that really happen? Before I could even say anything, she says, "Oh, there's a little blood on the bed," and she gets up and she goes to the bathroom, and she calls out from the bathroom, "You better call my doctor. I'm bleeding." And so I did, and luckily their office wasn't really very far from where we lived, and because they said, "You better come in and let us take a look." So we rushed right up there, and he says, "I believe you had a miscarriage." She said, "No, that's impossible. There's not enough tissue. It was just blood. There was no tissue. I'm 4 months along almost, and there's going to be some tissue." And he goes, "Well, you must not have seen it." And she says, I'm telling you, there was no tissue." And so he recommended we went right across the street to Women's Hospital in East Sahara. No longer there now. It's a car dealership, but at the time it was real close to the doctor's office, and he checked her in there and said he's going to perform what they call D&C, scrape the womb, when they think a woman's had a miscarriage. And so I had called my mom and told her what happened, and she called her mom, the my girlfriend's mom, and they both came down there, and we were in the waiting room, and I seen the doctor coming out of the walking down the hall after the procedure, and he had this funny look on his face, and I thought something happened, and I got up to meet him before he even got there, and he said, "Oh no, everything's okay." He goes, but he actually was sort of like rubbing his head, and he said, "It's the damnedest thing I ever seen." And I'm like, "What?" He says, "If I hadn't just saw this woman and she wasn't a patient of mine, I would think she's never been wasn't ever pregnant." And I go, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And he said, "There was no tissue. The womb had already been scraped clean. There was absolutely nothing in there." And I just knew what happened. I wasn't going to tell him, but I turned around to my mom and I said, "They took it." And I don't even know why I said it, like at the time. And I just walked away, and I'm not sure that she even understood exactly what how would they know? But and later when they checked her out, we were driving back, and it was something like didn't even want to like talk about it, but we when we did finally start talking about it, we pretty much agreed that she remembered the same thing I did. They let us both remember, and we just made an agreement, like, look, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't change anything. It's done. Nobody's going to believe this anyway, and let's just let it go and try to go on with our lives. And so mysteriously enough, years later.
Sorry to cut in, but so did your girlfriend remember the whole situation? So when she wakes up, she doesn't remember, right? Because when she sees the blood, she's concerned.
Yeah, I don't know if she did at that time or not, because it was just, she was more concerned with that. That was like the immediate concern. We didn't even go back to, oh, man, I had this weird dream. It was just like, oh, my God, we got to get to the doctor. That was the only thing that was going on at that point.
But later she did have recollection of what had happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and not only that, she still does. I got contacted for one of the television shows that we've done, and Monsters and Mysteries in America, and I got a hold of her through Facebook, and hadn't spoke to her in years and years and years, and they wanted to interview her, and she agreed to be interviewed. And when they did, they did it separately. When they came back, I asked the producer, I said, what happened? And he said, well, she backed up your story 110%. She remembers almost verbatim what you said happened. So, you have two people that were taken at the same time who both remember exactly the same thing happening.
Oh, geez.
But that's where the hybrid child, and I don't know if it's related to that or, like you said, from some other time when they take sperm, which happens on a pretty regular basis. And but about 2 to 3 years later, I was alone, taken alone, and which is thankfully most of the time the case. I certainly wouldn't wish this on anybody else. And they took me into an area that I was kind of alarmed by, because it was pretty dark. There was just some dim ambient light, and most of the time, at least on my experiences on the craft, it's always been a very bright kind of. It's a different kind of light than we have, but it's very bright. And this wasn't the case. And the room was rather large, and it was there was a ramp. Most of my experiences and I've had other experiences where I believe I have not been in an actual craft, that I believe it's here in conjunction with probably our own government. I don't know who, but there's a difference. You can tell after a few times of this. You can start telling the difference of where you're at. But this in the crafts, they don't like stairs. They like ramps, and there was a large ramp and a light at a doorway. They actually have the ability to control light, and the light was very bright in the room. It was so bright I couldn't see in the room, but it wasn't really filtering into the room that I was in. And I was standing at the top of this ramp, And I seen a figure break the light, start walking up the ramp, and I could tell that it was a female hybrid as she got closer, and she was carrying a child, and she brought this child up to me, set the child down, and wanted me to interact with it. I refused. She told me it's my child. I also denied that, because you don't want to. There was a time when I was trying to not. I wouldn't try to go. I would try to not go along with what they wanted me to do. It was just sort of the fighter spirit in me, but eventually I sort of succumbed to the idea that, look, just get it over with, and maybe they'll take you back, and kind of gave up on that. But I looked down at the little girl, and she just had this look on her face, and she looked different, but she wasn't by any means hideous. And there was just something compelling about her. When I looked at her, I have a soft spot still for children and animals, and so I was like, well, it's not her fault, whatever they're trying to do to me. And she just had this look that just drew me in, and I kneeled down and started kind of interacting with her like you would a child here. She didn't speak to me, but she seemed to enjoy it, and she was very curious about me, it seemed, as I was about her. And I was actually kind of feel sort of a bond with this child, and they let that go just about long enough to establish that. And then the female hybrid took her back, and I started asking, no, don't take her, wait, at that point I didn't even want her to leave, and I never knew if it was just a mental thing they were doing to me. Was it the fetus they had taken a few years earlier, was now a child? Was it nothing to do with me whatsoever? Was it from sometime they had taken sperm and maybe? I had all these questions going through my mind, and I never found that out. They would never answer me.
Was there any kind of other communication that was going on between you and the aliens?
Other than, what you mean with the hybrid?
Yes.
It seemed like she had, she was just doing her job, like the adult hybrid. I didn't really get the feeling like she was the mother or anything like that. I just think that it was just like her job to come up and get me to interact with the hybrid, and I'm sure I was being monitored. I just couldn't see, and I think that they wanted to once again just test my emotional reaction to it, and maybe even they're doing the same thing for the hybrid child. And that's one of the things that I've always wished that I would see her again, actually. And all these years later, I still to this day wonder what happened to her. Simple things like what was her name, where is she at, what does she look like now? Is she really somehow part of my DNA? Is some part of this creation? And it's just more the mental stuff that they put you through. I think they kept that from me on purpose. And it's one of the things that I hope I find out before I die. It's bothered me for years and years. And I always knew that if I ever did get the courage to write a book, I knew for years and years that it would be called Children of the Greys, and that as an honor and tribute to her, I would put her on the cover. And that was just something that my brother, Jeffrey Oldham, he's an award-winning artist here, just a very talented man, and I did my best to describe her, and he did an absolute great depiction of very, very close to what she looked like and on the cover. And when I saw it, I was like, wow, it was almost like you were there too. And so, and many people have contacted me and told me that, not only have they seen similar looking hybrids under the similar circumstances, but that they just felt so drawn to this particular child.
Wow. Well, what was interesting is when I was doing the interview the other night with John, I was looking through some of the evidence that Dan had collected over the years, and there was a few very interesting pieces. One was a picture that they were taking outside by the deck, and you could barely see it. It was like she was kind of like under the deck. You could see it through the slats, and when you would zoom in, you could see this little girl with blue eyes, blonde hair, very similar to the picture on your book.
Yeah.
And then there were two other ones. One was that they had caught on the property, like on a tree-lined area where she was kind of like took off around behind a tree, and they caught her. And another one when he was speaking at a conference, and he happened to see her in the audience and snapped a picture, and then tried to get to her, and she disappeared. But the one thing that's very similar between the picture that you had put on your book and Stan's case was that they, are very fair children, blonde usually, blonde hair, ones that I've heard of, and it's these blue eyes. But they seem to look human, other than you can tell they're not. The eyes are usually larger.
The eyes were different, and she had like a bluish gray kind of eye color. Her hair was sort of a whitish blonde, and a little bit thinner than depiction. But you have to deal with the background on these book covers and stuff, and I wanted her to stand out, so we gave her a little bit more thicker hair than what she actually had. But yeah, it's interesting that the hybrids do have a lot of similar traits about them that a lot of the reports say, and it makes you wonder, about the idea of clones. I've seen and in a couple of incidents where humans that I didn't believe were hybrid, but they look so much alike that I really wondered that they were actually clones, and they were working with the Greys themselves, but they didn't speak telepathically. I mean, they actually told me to shut up, and in no uncertain words, because I had recognized another woman that they had brought into the room where I was at, and I was trying to get her attention, but she was in, I call it like the waking zombie state. When I have seen other humans, they've frequently been in that kind of a condition that they seem awake but not awake, and I've even wondered how many times that I've been in that same kind of condition. But these guys, they had dark hair. They looked like clones of each other, and they were dressed in these like really tight-fitting black uniforms. And one other time I seen another one. At that particular time, I didn't think I was in a craft. I really thought I was in a facility here. The lighting, they had like the furniture had edges on it. That's not the case on these crafts. Everything is rounded. Everything is rounded off. And it seemed like something like you would see in a doctor's office or a laboratory here. Everything about it seemed like that they had taken, and that's where I'd seen this woman. But the other time I saw a similar guy, and I was like, is this one of the same guys, or is it another human-looking guy that looks just like these other guys? Right. So it makes you wonder, if some of this doesn't have to do with cloning as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Renee, we've talked about this a lot, but it does seem that they are attempting to do some kind of cloning program or to make a new type of race. Which is,
yeah. Whatever the actual agenda is, which I don't believe anybody truly knows, but whatever it is, the clear thing is, as far as the Greys concerned, and I do think that they're also in conjunction with reptilian species. I think that's, especially in recent years, becoming more prevalent, more reports of that. Even my own experiences, I've had some that's not in the book, because they happened after in this last year. That has to do with what I would perceive as reptilian hybrids. And there seems to be a lot of hybridization, so to speak, going on. And I think whatever the agenda is, the one thing that we know for sure, that they're creating a hybrid race. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And it's probably got to the point now, and I think they're probably trying to do this, but, I mean, I believe that they admire us as physical specimens. That was one of the things, and I also think that they are very interested in human sexuality and the emotional makeup behind it, and just in their emotions in general. And maybe at one time that's what they had. Maybe they've relied so much on technology for tens of thousands of years that they lost. Maybe that's how their bodies became so atrophied. Who knows? But I think if you took their intellect with a body that can do the things that our human bodies are capable of, you've got quite a species there.
Right. Well, I want to remind our callers, I know we had a caller on the line, actually one of my investigators, and she got disconnected somehow. So, Devlin, feel free to give us a call back, and we'll put you right through. For anybody else who might have a question for Brett or even a comment on their own story, I mean, our chat room is buzzing with all kinds of people who have had very similar experiences. It's quite interesting watching how it all kind of unravels and as people talk amongst themselves in the chat room. So
that's an interesting point, Christina, because it's a worldwide phenomenon, and it's happening on a grand scale that people have no idea just how big this is.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Why we have the chat rooms and subjects like this is to put all our minds together, because it's all part of the puzzle. We are all part of this grand universe that we're able to learn from them as well, and how we can learn about ourselves and how we deal with each other. We have many races here on Earth as well, so it's a matter of learning how to get along with one another and learning to adapt to every situation without, the so-called hostilities as we have, in the world today. So,
yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have noted this or not, but a lot of people that's went through these experiences, it will change you in that respect. I mean, you start looking at our world so much differently and appreciating a lot of things that most of the general public will take for granted, and it's almost like it enlightens you to some degree. Once you kind of go through the fire, so to speak, when you come out the other side, and it will, a lot of people become they sort of lose their dogmatic religious beliefs, but became very more spiritual-centered type people. I've seen it time and time again.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we've got our caller back online, so we're going to go ahead and put her through so she can ask away. She's been patiently waiting, and she's actually one of the people who had spoke to me before, who was very excited to hear that you were going to be a guest on our show after reading your book. So,
oh, great.
Do we have her online? Devlin?
Yeah.
Oh, Nate. I said she was. All right, Tiffany, you can go ahead and put Devlin on so that we can get her question. If you're hearing me, let me know, Devlin, when you are on the line.
Sure.
Technology.
She's there, honey. She's there.
Deb?
Oh, hello?
Hey, how are you?
Oh, can someone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Christina? Yes.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, yes. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Brett. My name's Devlin. I am not only one of Christina's investigators on the UFO side of her paranormal group, but I'm also a MUFON investigator
Assistant State Director for Northern California.
That's great. Well, thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your book. I even posted it on my Facebook. I always let everybody know what I'm reading. I talk to many abductees like on a weekly basis due to my investigations, and so the abduction phenomenon is something that I've always been interested in, and I just wanted to thank you for being so open and honest in your book. I know that it's probably really hard to just, bear it all, but it's important, I believe, for people to share all that information and the experiences. It'll help others that are going through the similar things, and also for us investigators who are trying to look at certain parameters of the phenomenon. And the cover of the book of Children of the Graves, your brother did an amazing job artistically, because I always love pictures. I always tell all my witnesses pictures are worth 1,000 words. And I am glad that you meant, because one of the questions was I was going to ask, the child has the blonde hair, but she has a lot of hair. But then you had answered the question of it was a lot more sparse than on the cover, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. And I tried to depict the back part of it. I asked him, I told him about the room sort of being dark, and that the light, when the figures walked through the light from their room actually bled at that time into the room where I was at, and it was only until it didn't do that until they kind of broke the light barrier, and then the light filtered in, and that's what I was trying to depict in that the room itself, and some of the lighting that's coming around is that light filtering in from the doorway that they walked up through, and because of that, to get her to stand out enough, we sort of had to make her hair a little thicker and just a little bit blonder than it actually was. So yeah, it wasn't that thick, but other than that, he did I asked him to do that on purpose because I wanted her to people to be able to see her, with that kind of a background. But yeah, you're right. It was not as thick as, and even the tall female hybrids, it's the same thing. Their hair isn't like real thick.
Right.
The adult ones I'm talking about.
One of the questions I had was, when you were with your girlfriend back when she was pregnant, this happened in the late 80s, correct? And and then after the fetus was removed, well, I guess my question here, real quick, before I ask this other question was, did this girlfriend of yours, did she have experiences of her own prior to meeting you?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
No.
So this
or since. Or since, I think it was just, and that's one of the things that bothers me about being an experiencer is that we talked about earlier. I felt responsible because, wow, it's me, that caused this because, to my knowledge, it never happened to her before, never happened to her since. Although from what I gather, she's still pretty damaged by it, and fear of of them coming back, even to this day.
Yeah.
And and that's one of the things that you constantly worry about, not just for yourself, but for if you're around me. Is this going to happen to you? You know what I mean? And because the answer is yes, there is that possibility.
Yes, and when after they removed the fetus, this had to have been devastating for her, and having to wrap her mind around the fact that she remembered being that this event happened. How did she really work through the realization that this happened? That this wasn't a miscarriage, that this wasn't something that just happened. This is actually alien beings coming and, abducting her and taking.
Well, I know there was a lot of interest. Yeah, I know there was a lot of interest, in learning just that. That trying to figure out, what this was all about, and trying to learn more about the subject matter, but it was one of those things that happens to you in life, and I think by trying to bury it was the way of dealing with it, which is not really a good way, but that's pretty much what happened, and just like, okay, there's an interest in this now. You can see other shows. Maybe, Bud Hopkins had a couple books out at that point, and things like that. Maybe try to find out more about it, but at the same time, maybe it's just best to just let it go and just bury it, and never talk about it, and hope that it just fades into time. And that's kind of what happened. But she has been gracious enough. She actually appeared on an episode of Ancient Aliens with me about it as well. I haven't seen it yet, but everybody said it came out really well. So I think it probably helps her. It's taken a long time. I think it probably helps her to deal with it by coming out and talking about it now too.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you already answered my next question, was that after the initial time of seeing your hybrid daughter, they never presented her again to you?
No,
after that first time?
Not that I ever remember. And I've worked very hard on myself mentally. I ended up in therapy. This is how all of my stuff came out. I was in my early 20s and started having anxiety attacks, and they became crippling. And I've been an athlete when I was younger, been in front of people, all that. At that time, I was a musician. I played hundreds, if not thousands, of shows. Over the years, and so not a person prone to anxiety attacks. And I started having these anxiety attacks. Could not figure out why, and that's how it surfaced for me. It's like your subconscious can only hold so much, and it's going to start affecting you physically. A lot of abductees get into addictions. All kinds of things. Not even knowing that the real trigger point was these traumatic events. And but in my case, I went to therapy. I ended up in therapy because I started getting really severe agoraphobic. It really got crippling, and I went to two therapists. The first one I was getting nowhere, and the second guy, interestingly enough, I didn't get regressed to find out the memories of what happened to me. That's never happened. I've still to this day. I'm starting to consider it to go see if there's even more that I can pull out. But then again, I've met with Travis Walton, and talked to him about it, and he would tell me what happened to him when he was regressing to try to find out more, and that they brought him back out of it and of the hypnotic regression therapy session, and told him look, it's probably better for you because you might not. I don't think you're going to be able to handle this, because he started reacting in such a way they got concerned about him, and so after he told me that a few years ago, and I've never forgot that, So a part of me is a little bit afraid to do regression of what I will uncover, because it's hard enough to deal with what I remember as it is. But what happened with me, I did start working mentally. I really wanted to help myself in this situation. So not only was I going to therapy, and he was teaching me all these relaxation techniques and mental techniques, like a lot of the Eastern gurus and stuff like that do, like where you don't feel pain and things like that, which I got very effective at. I was going to a lot of metaphysics classes, and I took a self-hypnosis class. I was really doing a lot to strengthen my mind, and I think it helped. That and what happened between all that this stuff just sort of like, it was like there was a leak in the dam and then it broke, you know, and when it did, I mean, I was just flooded with all this stuff, and not only were it coming out in dreams, but it was coming out just, there would be certain trigger objects that I would see, and then all of a sudden I would start remember bits and pieces, and then more would start coming, and I didn't even want to accept it when it started happening to me. So if you're out there and you're listening and this is happening to you, I fully understand the denial part, because I did the same thing, because it's just not something that you want to believe is happening to you or accept. And it took me a while to deal with it, but I couldn't stop it then. And so all this stuff started coming back, and it got very difficult for them, because I think I worked so much on my mind, on my own mind control, to get better, that I think it hindered them somewhat, actually. And I did have one incident. I call it the intake room. There's always like this one place, like you end up at the very beginning, sort of brief examination before they're going to do whatever else they're going to do to you on that particular time. And I opened my eyes, and it was normally you have this sort of paralysis type thing, but this time I had been able to break it, you know, mentally. And I knew it. Mm-hmm. And when I waited till they started to walk up close to me, and I raised up very quickly and screamed, and they did not know how to react, because they're so logic-based, and it was so unexpected. And they didn't really exhibit fear, but it was sort of confusion, you know, like they kind of backed against the wall. And it was just the greatest feeling. It was my only sense of empowerment while they've had me ever. And so you can work on yourself like that. You can at least get a sense of empowerment here. And I try to encourage everybody that's having these kind of experiences to do that type of thing. Meditation is a great thing. You know, I highly recommend that, and it will also help bring about more memories of what's happened to you.
Yes. One final question, Brett. Thank you. So it's 2014. Looks like the book was copyrighted in 2013. Have you had any experiences this year? Yeah. I had a couple things that I hoped would stop. And I don't mind, like, you know, speaking publicly about it. I don't care. I mean, I had a vasectomy. And when I did, this was a few years ago, I actually believe that this is a possibility that this will stop them. You know, because I figured, well, they're just using me, you know, because I'm unlucky enough to have a certain DNA type that appeals to them, and it didn't. Unfortunately, it didn't stop them, and it continues. I've pretty much accepted that there is no stopping. Of course, I had a lot of people contact me and tell me that I could do this or do that and everything to stop them, and it's just they're going to stop when they want to stop. And so it continues, and it's not as frequent. I will say that. It was much more frequent when I would say, like, persons in their prime, you know, 20s and 30s. It was definitely more frequent at that time. I don't have the nosebleeds anymore. I actually was able to stop that a number of years ago. I asked them, because I attributed that to a nasal implant. I remember them putting it in, and, you know, all the sinus problems and the continual nosebleeds, and I asked them, like, look, I know you're going to implant me. Can you put it somewhere else, please? And they did. And so my nosebleeds, you know, that kind of stuff, all that has stopped. So it's a little easier to deal with some of the stuff now, but we've had some amazing experiences since the book came out, and it's starting to involve. I never had anything to do with reptilians, but until recently, and I've witnessed a hybrid, what I would consider it. To me, it looked like a cross between a human, a gray, and a reptilian. But we've had some stuff that's happened to us where
I believe Gina's involved now, and which bothers me a lot. But one particular morning last fall, that she got up and I looked at her, and she had these 2 scratch marks on each side of her collarbone, almost as if something with claws had their hand around her neck. And she's never ever scratched herself in her sleep. I know, it's the first thing that comes to your mind. We're investigators ourselves, so we try to debunk stuff before getting too worked up about it. Couldn't figure out, it's just strange where it was at. Almost the same links. Documented it. Thought, wow, that's pretty odd. I got in the shower. I feel this really bad burning on my leg, and I look down, and I have a large gash on my shin, like 5-6 inches long, like not just a scratch, but like, pretty deep. And so that really got our attention. I called her. I was like, look at this, so we took pictures of that. I'm like, so this is like, I got this, you got these 2 scratches on your collarbone. This is starting to be beyond coincidence. And we were both, I was like, did you have any like unusual dreams or, this kind of thing? And neither one of us had any kind of memory of anything. Went to make the bed and just about fell over from shock, because we discovered a 4-fingered handprint that looks like the substance is blood on our sheets in between our pillows. It's the left hand. It looks like something leaned over Gina's side and purposely left a handprint. So we haven't got it officially tested yet to see what the substance is, but it's clearly a 4-fingered handprint where the whole palm was in some kind of substance, which looked like dry blood to us. Nowhere else on the pillows, nowhere else on us, anything like that. And even though I had a rather large cut in my leg, it wasn't enough to cover somebody's hand. You're talking, it almost reminds you like when kids do finger painting, like in kindergarten, they put their hand and then, put their handprint up on the paper. It reminded you of that, except it was just, and it did look like possibly there was claws on it. And I think it was left there on purpose, no doubt about it. And we did experiments about that time. We started. Oh, I still have the sheet. Yeah, we've got pictures. I did reverse negative on the pictures to try to bring it out more. And in fact, when I spoke a few weeks ago for the Nevada MUFON here, I showed it, and it caused quite a reaction. It's caused quite a reaction with us because I'm trying to understand why they did it. Like, it really seems like that we were taken that night, and it seems to be leaning more toward either reptilian hybrid or reptilian, which is it's new stuff for me, and I don't know why. That now are they working in conjunction with the Greys or how the puzzle? It's like the more you learn, the less you know type thing, and so that's some new stuff that's happened that has certainly got our attention. Has kept us on edge, and of course we still have the sheet, and we took pictures. We took pictures of the scratches we had, and we haven't got it tested yet to see if it is actually blood. I don't know whose blood it would be, or it's just some kind of substance that they secreted. We don't know, but it was quite shocking to find it.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you answering all my questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and appreciate your kind words about the book.
Oh, you're welcome. It was great.
Thanks, Evan, for calling in.
You're welcome, Chris.
All right.
It seemed like, I don't know, if it may not have been blood or some kind of something from, like, the gland from their skin, possibly from their hands or something.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. Just visually, that's what it looks like. But, we don't. I don't think it was from us. I mean, we weren't bleeding to that extent. plus it was up between our pillows. And it was clearly, when we tried to recreate, like, the positioning of the hand, it really appeared to be like if somebody would get over you and, like, put their hands down and lean over on top of you, and it was angled like that.
Okay. Was it a large hand, or is it?
No, it was large, but it wasn't like giant size or anything like that. I've got pretty big hands, and it was about maybe a little bigger than my hand, but the fingers were very thick. It certainly wasn't like the Greys, who have very long, slender fingers. They were very thick, and there was only 4. We haven't really, like, released it publicly. I learned from paranormal research to be real careful about putting pictures like that out. I showed it in the presentations, and I'll probably continue to do that. Just to show people, because a lot of people ask, is this stuff still happening? And it's like, yeah, it's definitely still happening. I wish it wasn't. I would like to have a few years of peace before I check out, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a tough decision when you have them, when you're trying to look for some kind of validity and proof of things, because everybody likes to have this proof. But at the same time, you have to be cautious of, if you're going to get it analyzed and it's going to be tested for any kind of DNA. We've got to be watchful of, who's taking it and who's doing the testing on it.
Right.
Because we've heard.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of horror stories. I'm sure you guys have too about that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've heard some people that went through this whole sending stuff to some kind of laboratory, and then it comes back, totally negative. It's totally something different, and that it was real, but they've been proven false because they did the whole switcheroo kind of thing,
right.
Or whatever, to try to discredit themselves. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to say about the regression, because this is something that I learned myself over time, because I had been leaning towards going into regression to find out some answers for myself. Mm-hmm. And everybody that I was talking to and finding, it was very scary and very horrific, the things that they were experiencing and having to re-experience and things like that. And I actually agreed to do a regression. And the day that I was getting ready to do the regression, it was supposed to be later that afternoon, I was doing my daily meditation. And all of a sudden, as I'm doing my meditation, I get this message to not do the regression, that it was not time, and that I was going to encounter somebody else, and they gave me a description and the whole 9 yards, and that was the right person to do it with. Well, I ended up in meeting this person, and she was a hypnotherapist. She ended up being on my team, and Lori McDonald, and she is a regression hypnotherapist here in Sacramento. And something that, I was going through a lot of anxiety about actually going through with it. And one of the things that she had explained to me was the different types of regression that you can be put through. And she did something that was more up to date. It was a third-party regression, where when they put you through the regression, they show it to you as almost like a movie. So you are viewing it and watching it so that you can give the information, but you are not experiencing it. And
yeah, that's very strange that you bring that up, because I just talked to a lady here that's a doctor. She's got 2 PhDs, and she does regression therapy. She's seen me speak here recently and was telling me about the exact same thing.
Yes, and
same
I will
technique.
tell you, it's because I had Steve P.P.R.S, which is, was part of Charles Walton. And,
yeah, I've been on shows.
Yeah, so I have him. He's a good friend of mine, and so I had him on the show, and that was one of the things that we had talked, because I was getting all this information as I was interviewing him, and I said, are you planning on getting regressed? Because I felt as if Travis wasn't the only one who had had some experiences, but I think with everything that was going on, the last thing he wanted to do was deal with the same stuff that Travis was going through. And he said, actually I am, and I'm just getting ready to do it. And, he agreed that after he had done the regression, he would come back on the show and talk to me. And what he did was he sent me the actual clip of his regression. And I'm telling you, to even fathom for somebody, to see something like that, that would scare you enough into not wanting to do it.
Right.
You could see just the amount of fear he was re-experiencing.
Exactly.
And, which is why Lori explained that's exactly the reason that it's important that you do it in a third-party way, because otherwise they're going to be traumatized all over again because you're going to experience it opposed to just seeing it. So I would definitely, I think that regression for you is important, but I would also, definitely say that if you're going to do it, you should, look for somebody who, like the person who contacted you that does do it that way, because I think that's even more important.
Yeah, she got my interest a lot with that, and she was explaining it to me, and it did. If I do it, because Grant Cameron contacted me recently, and he was like, look, I'll even pay, and I told him I don't want to just for the very same reasons you just named, but it was. I met this woman like right after that, and I've since spoken to her 3 times, and I'm really kind of leaning toward with this technique that because she says the same thing. It's like you're almost like you watching yourself watching a movie of what happened to you. Is the way I understood it, and I was like, well, that's sort of a little easier to take than being fully experiencing it again.
Yeah.
Which is
when
anybody that's been through this doesn't want to do.
Yeah, and when I watched Stephen Pierce's, it literally brought me to tears, because I just thought, it's bad enough to have for anybody to have to experience that, once, but then to have to be traumatized again just in order to get some answers. So with the new technique out, I definitely think that it's something that should be utilized much more, because I think that, I don't know how much we're really helping people if we're putting them through regression and then it's traumatizing them more.
That's true. I agree with that. And I tell people, like, look, if you're not experiencing physical symptoms of this and you just have bits and pieces or maybe a weird dream about something, and there's a difference between regular dreams and these dreams or these experiences, because it's just your subconscious releasing what happened to you, and the details are different and everything. But if it's not affecting your life, I kind of recommend just leaving it. But it depends on what's happened to people. In my case, so much had happened that I just couldn't take it anymore, and it started manifesting physically.
Right.
And so, and when it gets to that point, then you got to release it some way, or you're just going to become a victim to it. And it's very important for anybody that's had these experiences to not become a victim. My whole thing is, when you talked about earlier, the helplessness of the situation. And it's so true, and it really it plays with your self-worth, because you feel like a lab rat. You just feel like you don't feel like a real person anymore, because these things happen and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's over and over. And you have to work very hard in this existence and be in control, or they win. Like I looked at it sort of like a battle, like if I let them control what I'm doing here, then they've ruined my entire life. They've I mean, Travis told me that flat out. You know, it ruined his life. You know, and I was like, I've always fought against it. I've always tried so hard to not let them, and even though it has and it does affect your life here, but the older you get, the stronger you can get, and you can learn to separate it and empower yourself here. And it's very important for people to do that and not become a victim and feel sorry for yourself and wish this. We all wish it hadn't happened for the most part. I mean, there's people that's had contactees and stuff with what they believe is beings are here to help us, and that's great, but in the majority of the cases with either some reptilian, I've heard some people say with reptilians that they've had a pleasant experience, but I've heard quite a bit of negative stuff as well. But with the Greys, and I don't think it's something that they're. I think it's just something they have to do. There's a sense of desperation in what they're doing. I really think that they're a dying species, and there's just a certain sense of desperation. But they completely lack empathy, or it seems it's completely devoid of emotion of what they are doing to people in the long run of things.
Right.
So, but you look at us. I mean, look what we do. Look what we do to other humans. Look what we do to animals. Just barbaric. It's just barbaric. And so, at least the way I look at it, they do bring you back. There is certain things that they have healed me. I've talked about that in the book. It hasn't been all completely negative, and so you try to get the positives out of it. It has helped me, and once again, I won't talk too much about the paranormal stuff, but I do relate a lot of that stuff in the book with the connection. But it has, for these experiences, in my belief, I vibrate at a faster frequency now because of the technique that they use, which I believe is interdimensional portals is how they're coming to get us. I've seen it, witnessed it. I didn't know for years and years, but I do now. And I believe by going through these dimensional portals that it changes the frequency, our frequency, the vibrational rate of our frequency, to more closely match the spirit world than this world. And so a lot of abductees come back and they have psychic gifts of different kinds. A lot of them are mediums, but the case being that, in my case, I use that now. I use that. I used to be afraid of all this complete contact. I didn't know why they were coming to me all the time. Now I understand it because you become a beacon, to the spirit world, and most of them. And we, once again, I don't want to get too far into this, but a lot of them are seeking help, and you can use positive things like that to as part of. To take away from the negative things that's happened to you, I'm actually glad that I have this high energy. I can do energy healing. I can help the spirit world and people in this world get closure and help those that are lost on the other side, because there's plenty of them. And and so that's what you have to do. Too many of us we'll just start drinking and drugs and whatever to escape the reality of this thing. And that's what anybody that's having these experiences listening, this is why I wrote this book, to show you that you can get through it no matter what. And you will see in the book that I've been through a lot, and you can get through it, can empower yourself, and you can still be productive and healthy and have a life that's not affected it's going to disrupt your quality of life in your everyday existence.
Right. I think that's so important. I tell people all the time that, happiness is a perception. I myself have a terminal illness, and there is no cure. And, I've come to grips with that. That's completely okay. I've never really been afraid of death or anything like that. but you have to, you can't fall into that victim role, just like you said. I mean, there are certain things that happen, and I truly believe that everything that happens in our life happens for a reason. We may not understand it at the time, but there is a reason, and we do come out of these things, stronger. And sometimes we don't understand that. We don't understand, of course, how this does affect, other people, and everybody's different. But for me, staying positive is very, very important part of it. And I think that's why it's so important, like what you're saying, and you writing the book, I think will help a lot of people. I mean, I didn't even realize that, just me talking to people online and, trying to keep people upbeat and positive, like saying, hey, look, if I can live with this and I can be positive every day, so can you. Don't fall into the victim role. So I think that it does empower them, and I think that it definitely can help. Learn something that you can use for the good, and move forward. But I do know that it is a feeling like when it's happening all the time, it's kind of you don't have any control. I think that's kind of where people feel that desperation and that depression. It's kind of like there is no way out and there's nothing they can do, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
One of the questions that, I have for you is, I mean, obviously it sounds like, you would love to be able to interact and meet your daughter again. And, and possibly there could be many more than just the one daughter. I mean, just because that's the one that you had and you were part of actually seeing them take the baby. Because from my understanding and from the people I've talked to, on many of the abductions, sperm or, with women, the eggs are taken. And these hybrid children are being made many at a time,
Yeah, I agree.
Kind of,
and I'm sure you're right.
And so are you still having abductions up to this point?
Yeah. I had something happen just about a month ago. And it was, once again, it was unfamiliar territory. And that's what's been happening recently is things have sort of shifted. I didn't remember a lot about it, but it was, I don't know, I didn't see who was doing it, but it seemed to be like underwater, some kind of an underwater facility, because I was in this cylindrical, large, rounded hall and being escorted, and in the middle, at the end of the hall, with these two large half-moon windows, and it appeared to be underwater. And in the middle of the floor was this like 6-foot-tall hexagon-shaped light source coming out of the floor. And it had like a lid thing on it, but the rest of it was just like this pure energy light source. And there was certain symbols like would pop up inside this light source. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I had no idea where I was at. And that's really the extent of what I remembered about it. But it certainly got my attention because of where it seemed to be, what this whole light source was at, where they purposely showing me some kind of a symbols. It just, like I said, it just continues on, and when you think you start getting a handle on what is happening, then more stuff happens, and it just gets more and more complex.
Right. Now, you did say that on some of these abductions that you remembered that you were taken onto a craft, but then you also that there were some times that you believed that you weren't, and that it was possibly, where you were here and it was something, governmental. Now, we do know, of many people who say that there are alien races working with our government, and in fact, that's kind of how this whole hybrid programs and stuff, kind of all came together, was the research
right.
and working together. Is that what your feeling was too? Is that the military now has been kind of been brought into all of this, and so just that like the aliens are doing their own research, we're doing our own as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just pure logic will tell you that there's alien interaction going on. I mean, not even getting into the ancient alien theories, but just looking
right.
at how the technology has advanced, even since Roswell,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the timeline of Homo sapiens, and of course, without getting into too much debate about people when they think whether the 6,000-year-old from the Bible says, which is obviously wrong. But, we've been around for a very, very long time. They found archaeological sites 25,000, 30,000-year-olds with intelligent design. But take that timeline and look how it took all this tens of thousands of years, and we got up to, in the 40s, to prop planes and cars that went 50 or 60 miles an hour, and that was it. And if it hadn't been for people like Tesla, we probably wouldn't even have made it that far. So, and then all of a sudden, and since then, and this is once again, if you look at the big picture of the timeline of advancement of our species. And they say we've only gained 2 to 3 points of IQ since 20,000 years ago. So I don't think we've just had this big burst of intelligence as a species. Right. But now we've got digital technology and nanotechnology and all these. I mean, just on and on and on.
Right.
This long laundry list of incredible technological advancements. In the timeline is just a very, very minute amount of time since we've been on this planet. So did we just get that much more smart in 70 or 80 years compared to tens of thousands of years before? I mean, so logic pretty much has to tell you that, well, we had help.
Right.
And so and there's I think it's pretty obvious there's a trade-off going on. To some degree, I understand it. I understand we are benefiting, but then on the other side of me has often wondered, due to our barbaric nature, that they're giving us this stuff to try to civilize us, so to speak, even though we think we're civilized.
Either that or blow ourselves up, or kill ourselves off, or save them some trouble. I mean, it could be either. I mean, but I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, to think that in all this time we've been so kind of primitive over time, and then all of a sudden we just have this burst, as if like somebody just got really smart all of a sudden. There's plenty of people's theories on what it could be, but I'm completely with you. I mean, I definitely feel like there has been some interaction between the two. I mean, obviously it's stuff that they don't want to release. I mean, how can you go from none of this stuff exists, and this is what you've been telling people for the last, 50 years or so, and then all of a sudden you're going to say, oh, well, okay, we'll admit it. It's really exists.
Yeah, there's too much distrust in the government as it is. And then
right.
and secondly, I don't know if we're actually ready for it.
Right.
As a society, there's a lot of people out there blowing their horns for full disclosure, and I can understand that to a certain degree, but and maybe those people are ready for the truth and deserve to be told the truth, but are we as a worldwide species ready for it? Because if you've got all these different religions killing each other over their religions, and has been for centuries, and it continues to this day, even the wars that we're involved in. And, you have some advanced species come down, crushes man's ego because we think we're the supreme beings in the universe, but, we're not even, I'm not even sure we're the supreme beings on this planet, I mean,
right.
You don't see
right.
dolphins and whales and elephants and doing the things that we do. And,
right.
so that we had this crushing blow that we're not the supreme beings, and we're not even close to deal with. And then they say, well, wait a minute. This Jesus guy and this Muhammad guy and this Buddha guy and whatever, you guys, you're wrong. Here's what it really is. Oh my gosh, those two things right there, I think would cause quite a lot of havoc. It would probably everything would probably collapse because people would just go berserk. So it's going to have to be dealt with in a manner. Even my book. I mean, I think that the Greys themselves, I really think that they wanted me to come out with this. And people have asked me, "Oh, you think the government's going to?" And I was like, "Why? I'm helping them." The more people can acclimate to this idea that these guys are here, they've been here for quite a long time. They're not the only ones, and there's reasons behind. Maybe you wouldn't be talking to me on this computer right now had it not been for these guys. So there's things that they have done for us as well. But I think that, and the polls show this too, that people are becoming much more accepting and believing in UFOs, and of course, they got to have somebody inhabiting them, driving them, controlling them, and they still haven't got on board like 100% with that they can make it to this planet. Of course, the more we understand about quantum physics, that's starting to change. It was just I believe less than a year ago, NASA came out and discovered all these wormholes all over our atmosphere, opening and closing, tons of them. And they're studying them right now, and they never knew they were even there. And they even come out and said, if we can learn to control and manipulate these, what we can do would be mind-boggling. They're even talking possible time travel. And it goes back to a lot of Einstein theories, but so quantum physics is starting to get there. And it's just look, just because we're not there and we don't understand these multidimensional realities, there was a time when we just thought there was just a three-dimensional world. That was it. Now there's 11 dimensions that physicists are claiming. So things are changing, and that's just what we know about. So there's all this stuff that people would have to instantly wrap their head around. I think it would just be too much for society. But if we slowly implement it, because you can see this, every few years they do these polls, do you believe in alien life? Do you believe it's visiting our planets? Have you, all this kind of thing like that. And 20 years ago, it was in the 20s, 25% maybe. I've seen something a few months ago that was 60-some% believe in it. So I don't think that. I think it's just a matter of time that, and the more people that come out with their stories of what's happening to them, I really think it does the government a favor.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that is too. And then we also see in the media and on television, we have a lot more shows, movies, all about alien life, life on the afterlife, aliens, spirits, all these different things. We've got all these new shows and all these quote unquote, reality, shows. We've got Ancient Aliens. There's so much more information out there. So it's not just some Joe Schmo from out in the rural area saying, hey, everybody, I was abducted or I saw, a flying disc. Now we've got people who, on a daily basis, are uploading, videos and, coming out to talk about, their experiences. And even if they don't get into the whole, lecturing and conference circle to talk about it, they just write a book. They just write a book to get it off of their chest and to put it out there, to kind of release it and let it go. And again, when people do that, you'd be shocked at how many people it will help. And even if your book only was to help one person. Now, obviously, I know it's going to be way more than that because I've talked to way more than that, just recently that have read your book. But for me, I always feel like even if it helps one person, then it was well worth it. If it can help one person feel like they're not alone.
Right, and that's the important message. You're not alone. Because it's like Renee said earlier, we're all in this together, and that's the bottom line. That's the truth. And we're all in this together, and people need to know that there's people who will listen to you if you've had these experiences. Not everybody's going to think you're crazy. And if they do, it just shows their own ignorance, because the evidence is mounting day by day on the reality of this, and talk to whoever. But like you mentioned, in whatever way, get it out, get it off your chest, let people know, and you will feel so much better about it. And the more people that do that, it helps us all.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at the things now that are, we talk about the reality shows, and of course, like Ancient Aliens. It kind of takes things out of it puts things in a different perspective. What we've learned as we grew up, what history was, and this is how it was, and we expect to believe that. But now, now we've got the Ancient Aliens saying, what if they were here before, that helped mankind build these large civilizations that were here before? They had technology back then, but now they're getting more people to start thinking for themselves. Wait a minute, that's a good point. Let me think about it. Let me research it. So that opens a whole new,
Yeah, that's true. The awareness is getting expanded by all this attention, and used to the shows would make fun of people like that. Newscasts would make fun of people and things like that. And any television that I've done, I tell them flat out that if you're just trying to use me as a joke, forget it. I don't want to be on your television show. I'm not going to do it. And I get assurance before, because I don't want to shed any kind of be part of anybody's joke about it, because it's just too serious, and there's too many people out there that are trying to deal with this. And that's what I'm trying to help those people and not make it worse for them.
Right. And being there yourself, you know that this isn't any joke, and that the detriment that it can have on people. And the last thing we want is, for people not to come out and talk about these things.
But it's getting so much better. So much of the media, it's so much better than it was even 10 years ago. The last 4 to 5 years is really starting to be a shift. And now, you see reports, and even some of the other paranormal subjects, you see these reports now, and you won't see the news people rolling their eyes or the reality host, whatever kind of show. It's starting to be taken very serious. And I think that's a big step forward.
Yeah. Well, and, hopefully soon, we will be at a point where, people will, put the seriousness, back into this topic. And as I said, so many people, we have to remember that, we've pretty much been programmed, from the moment, we were born, going to school, everything we ever learned or believed to be true, we were taught or told. So to go from completely believing anything and everything we were told, and then now all of a sudden, we're being told, this might not be the truth. That's a hard pill to swallow. But, slowly by slowly, that people are realizing, whether we, want it to be like this or not, this is the reality of how it is. So I am glad that there are people that, are getting out there. It's one of the reasons I, do the shows that I do is, to get the information out. I think it is so important, and, especially for people to understand that they are so not alone. They may feel alone, but I can assure you they are definitely not alone. And, just looking at, the listeners that we have for the shows, it blows me away. Every week they just climb and climb and climb. And it's because there's so many more people that can relate to this kind of stuff. It's not like that just late night, eerie, scary, storytelling. This is, people are like, okay, I want to hear about this, like what's going on and what's really happening. So it's nice to know. We got about 5 minutes left. It always goes by so quick. I am so glad that we're going to have you for Monday's Paranormal Connections show as well. So for anybody who wasn't here with us at the beginning of the show, Brett is going to be back for part 2 of his interview on Paranormal Connections on Monday night, this coming Monday night, where we're going to be talking about some of the paranormal stuff that has gone alongside his abductions and his experiences. And Brett actually is a paranormal investigator as well. A lot of us tend to have the same story, and it kind of brings us into this field where we start looking for not only answers to our own questions, but to help everybody else. So he will be back on Monday to talk about that and what he feels the connection between the paranormal, the spirits in that field, and ufology is. So I think it's going to be, part 2 to a great show. This has been a really, really good one. We've had a lot of really good feedback from chat and everyone. So I really am looking forward to that. But I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know where they can, number 1, get your book if they haven't already got it, and number 2, how they can contact you if they need, would like to get a hold of you.
Well, the book is a Kindle and print version on Amazon, and it's Children of the Graves with an E. And it's also, you can get it like Barnes & Noble and places like that. If they don't have it, they can get it for you. You can reach me through our paranormal. Gene and I are not really a big group; we're just us. But we it just makes it easier for people to find us. We go by Halo Paranormal and the number 1 at hotmail.com. Just Halo Paranormal, the number 1 at Hotmail, and you can. It's a good way to. That's also I put that in the book for the contact number and there's a website also. childrenofthegraves.com has some more information in the book trailer and stuff like that. Well,
I can tell you myself, I'm looking forward to reading the book. I mean, just talking to you and just, reading your bio and everything, it's definitely something that everybody should check out. It's always one thing when it's out there and people don't really know, but when it's a real life story. I mean, this is your life story, and this is, the kind of things that you've had to put up with and deal with on a daily basis, in a lifetime basis. And it just lets people know that, even though you've gone through a whole array of sounds like some pretty horrible, circumstances, you're still here, you're still strong, you're still moving forward. And instead of getting depressed and kind of giving up, you're standing up and deciding to find those answers for yourself.
Yeah, and that's kind of the message that I want to get out, and hopefully be a role model in that regard. So. But I appreciate you having me on. It was a great show, Renee. Also, thank you, and we'll look forward to coming back Monday.
All right.
We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely going to be. So everybody make sure to catch us for part number 2 of our interview with Brett. It'll be on Monday night, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same network, hopefully. Everything will be fine with our chat next week. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Again, to all of the listeners, you guys are amazing. Thank you to everybody in chat. So we will be back with you again next week. All month we've got some amazing, amazing topics and guests. So make sure to check us out and like our Facebook page. Good night, everybody. See you next week.
Good night.